Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason. I'm speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And today I'm doing a reaction to the documentary Get Back that came out on Disney Plus last Thursday. Of course, a lot of people doing reactions to this. It was a huge thing that everybody's looking forward to if you're a big Beatles fan like myself. But I don't know, I thought I should give a couple of my thoughts on the whole thing. Not that mine are any greater than anybody else's, but just what I thought when I watched it. Of course, it feels like it was been over a year since we knew this was coming out. In fact, that this might have been supposed to probably come out last year, except for the whole COVID thing. So it might have been a couple years that it feels like we've been waiting for this documentary ever since we heard it's coming out or Peter Jackson was working on it. So it felt like it was never going to come. It was just one of these things where every month I was like, all right, how many more months until the Get Back documentary? And it's like, man, we're never getting there. So it was incredible that it's like, wow, we finally got there. We finally got to November 25th, and we can actually watch this thing I've been looking forward to for quite a while. In fact, I would say it's the most anticipated thing I've had for a while, the last year or so. This was the thing I was most looking forward to getting to watch. More Beatles content. I always want more Beatles stuff. Anyway, so yeah, so definitely my excitement level was pretty high getting to this Get Back documentary. Um, anyway, so I just finished it yesterday, basically the third one. I watched about one a day for the last 3 days or so. 'Cause it takes quite a while to get through it. I mean, the first reaction I had when I got to the first episode, because of course this originally I believe was supposed to be like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour documentary. It was just supposed to be one 2 hour, 2.5 hour edited documentary, and we were promised that we're going to see the whole rooftop concert. I think it was like the big sell in it, but we're going to get a pretty good feel of like what was going on during those 22 days that they spent rehearsing and recording the Let It Be album. And then we get this, because I think it got postponed for so long, we then get this, oh, it's going to be 3 episodes long. It's going to be like up to, several, 6 hours. I thought it was supposed to be 3 2-hour episodes. So I thought it was going to be like 6 hour long documentary, which was like, wow, that's even better. Like we were all, I think everybody was excited. Me too. Like, wow, we're going to get 6 hours of this instead of just 2.5. Like that seemed pretty exciting. And so I thought coming into it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch 2 hours each episode. And then I come into the first episode and it's like 2 hours and 36 minutes. And I was like, wow, this is over 2.5 hours. The first episode. This is pretty incredible. Anyways, and I found myself watching the first episode. Of course, the first episode is more of a downer than the other three because they spend a lot of time in Twickenham studio, which they're kind of miserable. Of course, we have the whole George Harrison getting very frustrated. Paul's frustrated. They get in some arguments. George finally just quits, and then they spend the last part of the first episode talking about what they're going to do, how they're going to move forward, how they're going to try to get George to come back, or how they're going to do that, and all this. But watching the first episode, I was about an hour into it. I remember thinking, okay, am I about done with this? And because I wasn't paying attention at the time, but I was getting a little tired of the video, and so of the documentary, and so I was like looking at how much time I had left, and I had like an hour and a half left, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I still got an hour and a half of this. Like we haven't gotten anywhere. It felt like an hour, and we'd like of just nothing really happening. So I'm like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna go if I'm going to have to watch this again from this episode and for 2 more episodes. Because I would say this documentary series is definitely for hardcore Beatle fans. This was made for. I mean, I think if you're not a Beatle fan or if you're a casual Beatle fan, I mean, you need not apply to this documentary. It is, I think, hard to get through, even for a hardcore Beatle fan like myself. Because there's just, I would say 90% of the documentary is the Beatles just goofing off, playing just random songs, some of their own. Some songs are going to be in future solo projects. Some are just either old 50s songs or even current 60s songs that they like, I guess, and they just start playing randomly. So I say like 90% of the documentary is just that, them goofing off and not really getting anywhere. And like 10% maybe is them actually like working on a song and actually progressing on the song and getting better. Anyway, so I guess going into it, I knew there was going to be some goofing off. There was going to be them just playing a lot. I didn't realize how much I could take when I was watching it. After a while, I got a little tired of watching them just kind of constantly goofing off. I keep saying that, but that's kind of what they're doing. Either they're like starting a song and John will just start singing in a funny voice and Paul will start singing a funny voice, or they'll just start making up lyrics as they're singing. So they never get like a clean, like I'm picturing in my mind, like you're rehearsing a song, you're going to try to get through the whole song as best as you can and then go back and try to work on different parts or something. But it felt like they would say, all right, let's work on this part. And they work on it for, 30 minutes on this one part, it felt like. And they weren't getting anywhere because they kept messing it up every time they were singing. They would, like I said, just start doing funny things and not really, doesn't seem like they're doing a serious take on the song. And so, of course, as a Beatles fan, I'm looking forward to listening to them singing their songs. And so they're starting to sing a song and then they just kind of quit and they start goofing off. And I'm like, man, I just really want to hear them sing that song and get through it. And just, I love that song so much. And so that was a little strange for me, or a little hard for me to get through sometimes. Like definitely the first episode, like you see the Beatles to me seem like they weren't really into the music, and of course it was because in their big Twickenham studio, this movie studio, it was a lot of space, and they were just huddled up in this one little spot, and I think it just felt weird to them. They're used to doing all their stuff more in the studio, and then they had cameras on them, which was weird, and then they're also trying to do it in the morning, which they're not morning people. From what I understand, rock and roll people aren't morning people. They like to stay up late and sleep late and do all their stuff in the evenings. Besides, doing drugs and all that probably take effect, and it's hard to get up in the mornings after a long night of drugs. So it was all just a little strange for them, I think, and you kind of tell there's just not a lot of enthusiasm in playing their songs or being the Beatles, I thought. So to me, like watching that first episode, you're thinking, yeah, the Beatles probably should break up because they just don't seem like they're into what they're doing anymore as a group like they probably used to be. I'm sure when they were doing Please Please Me, the first album, they were so excited to be in the studio, getting the first album, and there's probably more excitement in the air, for the first several albums, for sure, I think. So I think seems like they're maybe getting a little tired of doing it. I don't know. You can definitely, in the first episodes, for sure, like Paul McCartney definitely is the most vocal out of the group. Definitely he's one trying to drive the group he's really trying to get this project done, I think. And sometimes he seems frustrated, like the other three aren't as, invested in the project as he is. And then that's where we get a lot of arguments between him and like George, for sure. John, I was surprised in the first episode, John was very quiet. I always thought John was maybe more vocal of a person in the group, but in that first episode, he was very quiet, didn't really say a lot, didn't contribute a whole lot to what was going on. So I was kind of surprised by that. And it seemed like mostly it was Paul and George doing a lot of talking back and forth for the most part. Ringo is very quiet because he doesn't have a lot to do because he's not writing the songs. He's not coming up with the melodies and lyrics and, the guitar stuff. He's just sitting behind the drums, and sometimes he's not even doing any drumming. He just sits there and watches. Every once in a while he'll do just a simple drumming, nothing complex, just enough to just keep a beat, playing something while they're playing. Anyway, so yeah, it just didn't seem like they're much of a group in that first episode. So I think it was definitely a good thing they got out of that Twickenham studio. You can kind of tell they needed to get out of there. They needed to make some changes. Because I like Paul, because Paul kept going back like this. So you can tell he keeps putting his hair back, and you can go, yeah, that's what you do when you get frustrated. You sit back and you pull your hair back, and you're like, oh my gosh, like how are we gonna get through this? So you can tell that Paul was so frustrated, which was kind of interesting to see. So then once we get to the second episode, of course, I get the second episode and it's like 2 hours and 53 minutes long, I think. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's about 3 hours. Like, can I get through 3 hours? I love the Beatles, but even this was hard for me to get through. But it definitely livened up once I got to the Apple Studios at Savile Row. It felt a lot more upbeat, a lot more enthusiasm about the music. They were doing a lot more takes of the music. I felt like they were getting a lot further on the songs. John was much more vocal once they got in the studio. he was getting definitely. He's definitely was joking around a lot more when he had the studio. I mean, John more than anybody felt like he was always aware of the camera on him because he would constantly look at the camera and make a face, which John was always known to do from the beginning of the Beatles. He loved to make faces at the camera and make jokes and stuff like that. And so he definitely came alive in the studio and was making jokes and making faces at the camera and kind of doing like quick looks at the camera, like oh, I know you're there, like I don't know. So he definitely was playing around more. Of course, George was a little more positive. There wasn't any, we didn't really see much arguments at all once he got into the studio. Everybody just felt more comfortable. And like I said, lots of goofing around, lots of joking, which was interesting to see the Beatles kind of just hanging out and just being themselves. I think more than anything, this documentary really showed us like the personalities of each individual Beatle and how they worked together and how they worked on the songs. That's probably maybe the most interesting part of the documentary and why the documentary was made. Is we get to see what it was like to see them in their element, hanging out, coming up with these songs and kind of get a little more detail of what the Beatles were, I guess, at the end of the Beatles, their career as a band. I would say, like I said, for me, like, I love documentaries. I watch a lot of documentaries. This was definitely way too long of a documentary. I mean, almost like 8 hours. Like I said, most of it was like not really a lot going on. It didn't really progress too much. I would say a documentary has like two purposes, I would say. A documentary is like a movie. To me, a movie's main purpose is to be entertaining. You want to, whatever movie you're making, you're trying to entertain the audience so that they are at the end are like, wow, that was incredible, I want to watch it again kind of attitude. Documentary, you still have to be entertaining. Definitely want to keep the entertainment because even documentary, you want them to go, wow, like I like to watch that again. And then the second purpose is be educational. I think the whole purpose of documentary is to really take on a subject and educate the audience, give them something they never knew about, that's interesting subject matter that they didn't know about. And so that's the two purposes. I would say on this documentary, Beatles, I'd say entertainment value to me was really low. Like I said, like I'm not gonna say I was disappointed with what I saw because it was, like I said, you get some value with seeing the personalities of the Beatles and how they work together. I think that definitely like grows your like wow, okay, you're almost like a fly on the wall, like seeing what it's like. So that was kind of cool. And there's some interesting moments in there for sure. I keep saying for sure, but there are definitely some interesting moments in there. But I would say I would probably never watch this again. It was kind of a slog to get through a little bit. So I'd say entertainment value to me was pretty low. Like I'd rather see a 2.5 hour documentary, edit this down to 2 hours, maybe 2 hours. Like I always say, it's always good to edit down. You never want to be too long. You can be too short, but don't be too long. So I would be okay with like a 2 hour documentary, maybe splicing a lot of the stuff together. Or show like 10 45-minute episodes because I could probably get through a 45-minute episode okay, and then take a break and then watch the next one instead of trying to watch 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours of footage at once, or having to take breaks in between the footage and come back another day. Of course, with still a documentary, you need a beginning, middle, end. So somehow if they can come up with a way to come up with segments that have a good ending to it that make you interested to watch the next segment, they could come up with some way to do that. It would be more interesting of a documentary, I think, than what they made. But like I said, I'm glad I watched it. I probably won't watch it again. It just doesn't have enough entertainment value to me to want to try to go through that experience again. But definitely was educational, I think. Like I said, I think the biggest thing is just coming off of this is just you seem to know the Beatles a lot more, or this period of time of the Beatles and what they were like. Anyway, so I like that aspect, is that I felt like I learned something about the Beatles watching it, which is what you want through this documentary. So that part was good. I would say like one of the things watching it, there's basically I want to say like 4 or 5 songs that they played like a ton. They really had 4 or 5 songs really ready to go off this album, and they just hit you to death with it. And Get Back doesn't. They don't start with Get Back. Get Back is the one that Paul McCartney comes up with during the filming. It seems like, but yet towards the second and third episode, they play Get Back 100 times. You hear that, and then when they get to the rooftop concert, they play it like 3 times on the rooftop concert. So you hear Get Back quite a lot, which obviously was a big. It was a single, I believe, and it was one of their big songs on the album for sure. I said for sure again. They also had "Don't Let Me Down," which they played from the very first episode on. It was one of the first songs they started practicing on or rehearsing on. So you hear "Don't Let Me Down," which I love. "Don't Let Me Down," but man, I heard that song so many times throughout. Then you got "I've Got a Feeling" came from the very beginning. They worked on that quite a lot, and then I'd say "Dig a Pony" they worked on a lot. I would say those 4 songs were like the 4 main songs from the album that you heard. And like, that's okay. Like, I like those songs fine. They're not my favorite necessarily on the album. I think Let It Be is a great album, even though some of the best songs weren't hardly even talked about in the documentary, which is kind of, that's just the way it is. But it's kind of disappointing to just hear those 4 songs over and over again. I think after watching the documentary, like, I don't think I'm going to listen to those 4 songs for a while, because I think I just heard those to death. And heard you hear a little bit of progression where it's a finished product. In fact, the finished product comes pretty quickly. I feel like they still had a lot to work on. Next thing you know, they're playing on the rooftop, and they're playing it perfectly. And you're like, wow, they got there pretty quickly. So I don't know how they did that, how they got from not really knowing what they're doing to perfect song in 22 days or whatever. That was 3 weeks, So that's pretty. I mean, when you get to the first couple days, you're like because originally I think you're supposed to get all this done in like 2 weeks, and it's like I'm watching the first couple of days going, there's no way you're supposed to get. They're expecting to get 12 songs or something rehearsed and perfected in like 2 weeks to play live. Like, I don't think that's gonna happen, and it didn't. Like I said, they came up with maybe 5 songs that were really good enough to play live. By the end, I mean it was an impossible task to try to get that many songs perfected in that amount of time. So they got about 5 songs kind of perfected. If you count the one after 909, definitely. But that was such an easy song to perfect, I think. And it was a song they wrote back in the Quarryman days or something. So it was easy to get that one out, and that's why they did that one too on the rooftop. And I can't remember George's For You Blue, whatever, might have been on the rooftop. I can't remember if he played that. That was one they worked on quite a bit towards the end, so they kind of got that one down pretty good, I would say. In fact, yeah, I think they pretty much got that perfected and recorded by the end of the 3rd episode. So for me, it's like Let It Be, Long and Winding Road, Two of Us, Across the Universe are like my favorite songs on the album. And we barely really get to any of those. Like towards the end, Let It Be and Long and Winding Road, we barely get snippets of them practicing. Like we only get through like maybe the first verse, and then they start over and do the first verse over. I mean, you pretty much just hear the first verse of those 2 songs 50 times, because they're just like keep going in, messing up, goofing around, coming back and trying it again. I don't know. So it's like, man, I really wish I could hear a finished product of those 2 songs. I love those songs so much. Two of Us, they did work on a fair amount. I think from the very beginning, though, I don't think they knew it was going to be a 2 acoustic guitar song at the beginning. They were working on with their bass and electric guitars. But then Paul said, I really need to play the acoustic, because I wrote this, with the acoustic guitar in mind. So he finally puts down the bass, and I think George takes the bass, and it sounds a lot better when they get the 2 acoustics out towards the end. But then even then, they don't really get I never hear a really good clean run through on Two of Us, which is such a great song. And then Across the Universe, we only get like 1 take on it. It seemed like might have been even the first episode. John sings a little bit of Across the Universe, and that's all we get. And I don't think they play it at all in the 3rd episode. So I don't know if that was just not very, like I said, it wasn't a very finished product yet, so they didn't really work on it very much. Interesting, like watching this, and of course, like Don't Let Me Down doesn't even make it on the Let It Be album. And then you got like She Came Through the Bathroom Window and doesn't make it on there. There's some Abbey Road songs that they're playing, and it seems like they're getting ready to maybe make it on Let It Be, and they seem like they're pretty close to finishing those songs. I don't know why they never got it onto the Let It Be album. Maxwell Silverhammer, he practices a fair amount, you know, and so of course, so you got a lot of these Abbey Road out songs. Oh Darling, he does quite a bit of Oh Darling, in fact. So I was kind of surprised that didn't make it on the Let It Be album, because it seems like they're pretty getting ready for those. I mean, Paul definitely had the most songs ready. I mean, this definitely was a Paul song album. I mean, from the very beginning, he had I've Got a Feeling. He was ready for that one, and Two of Us. They're kind of ready to practice that one. He eventually gets Get Back by second episode. He was ready for Get Back. It seemed like he wrote during the process. Of course, then he had Let It Be and Long Run Road. He had those ready to rehearse. And then he also had, like I said, Maxwell Silverhammer. She Came to the Bathroom Window. Oh Darling. He had a lot of these Abbey Road songs ready at that point. So he definitely was producing, contributing the most. John, like I said, doesn't seem like he was contributing as much at this time. He brought, the big one he brought was Don't Let Me Down. That seemed like the one that was definitely was the one most ready. And Dig a Pony, I guess. Those two were like the two that were really ready. Of course, he made up like Maggie May and Dig It. And you hear those throughout the thing, but those are really nothing songs that he kind of just came with on. I think he didn't really put a lot into, I don't think. Of course, Cross the Universe is probably the best song, and you barely hear that, so he's still working on that one. And then George comes up with I Me Mine and For You Blue kind of on the spot. Like, it was kind of interesting how George would come in and say, hey, I wrote a song the other day, and it's I Me Mine or For You Blue. Or then he works barely a little bit on something. He's kind of getting there on something. So he's not quite there. He's working on that song, which would be like his masterpiece song. So George brings just a little bit, but not just during the process. So it just seemed like really it was Paul that was really ready for this project more than anybody else, by far. Trying to think what else I said quite a bit. Trying to think what else I would be worth talking about, but that's my main things. Is like I said, it was just way too long, I think, and though I like the songs, it was just kind of hard to get through them, just goofing off all the time, and also talking about where they're going to do the concert. That was getting a little tiring because like Michael Lindsay Hogg, the director, kept coming in going, "Oh, I think he was really pushing. We need to do the concert somewhere great, you know." And of course, I know they're going to do it on the rooftops. I'm like, I don't care because I'm just ready for them to get to the part where they go, "Oh, let's do it on the rooftop," because I know that's where it's going to be. So that's one of those things where I know in hindsight what's going to happen. So I don't really care about them talking about where they're going to do it. So there's definitely moments like that I was like, oh, okay, we could skip this part. I like to skip this. I just want to hear them sing Beatles songs is mostly what I like to hear and see them go from the beginning to a finished product, which is to me the most interesting part of this documentary is to see them go from not really knowing the songs to perfecting them at the end. Like I said, they can only perfect 4 or 5 of them maybe by the end, but even the Beatles, I mean, you can't do everything perfect. It takes some time to really work on songs and get them right. Anyways, but yeah, definitely interesting to watch. I'd love to see a even more edited version. Would be really great, but who knows? But anyways, I'm sure there's more I can say, but that's probably enough for right now. So thank you for watching the video if you're watching this, and thank you for liking it. And I just appreciate all the the subscribers for supporting the channel. And just tell me what your thoughts were on the Get Back documentary. How you liked it, and what your thoughts were on it. I'd love to hear it. And just thank you, and have a nice day.